Thanks so much, Robin. I'm not too sure how I flick this, but I'm here to talk to you about autism. I first got into the autism world when I was doing my undergraduate. One of my mum's friend's sons had actually been diagnosed, and my mum said, "Oh, you're a good lad. Why don't you go off and give the family a bit of respite?" And I can honestly say that the extent of my thought patterns at that age was booze and girls, and to have that experience of seeing a family realise that their beloved child that they'd wanted for years and years and years was developing differently. The recognition that had happened, the search for a diagnosis, the coming to terms with the diagnosis, the grief for a child that's still living, and then the search for therapies. It was something that blew my 18-year-old little mind, and it stayed with me forever. And I've managed to forge a career in it. And I've always thought that, you know, if I could dedicate my professional life to helping these unbelievably special and really heroic families, then it's a professional life well spent. So the purpose of this talk right now is really just to give you a bit of an idea about what autism is, and tell you why not only does it stroke the idealistic streak of all of your brains, but really the geek streak just absolutely gets exercised here. So I'm assuming if I press it is. So autism, what is autism? I have no idea. Nobody does. And that's the great thing about this area. It changes literally from day to day what the hell this thing autism is. Now, when I started in the field about 15 years ago, it was certainly a condition. It was one disorder. It was this disorder where kids develop a little bit differently. We know absolutely now, mainly through the work of very clever people like Gareth, that it's not one condition, it's a cluster of different disorders, okay? When we started out, we were looking for the gene for autism, but we're not finding the gene. We're going to find dozens and dozens of different causes for the different varieties of autism. So that's the very, very important point right at the start. We diagnose autism based upon behaviour, and it's the same with every kind of neuropsychiatric condition that we know about, okay? Schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, autism, ADHD, we diagnose everything based on behaviour, and this is one of the fascinating things about autism. It's so linked to sociology. The spectrum goes from here to here, and what we say is a disorder is basically what we as humans put the line, and that line shifts between years as to what we say is normal and what we say is abnormal. Another fascinating thing about autism is that the symptoms vary hugely in severity, and I think that's what most people know. People know now Rain Man and that there's a spectrum. Now, I work at the Telethon Kids Institute, where I should have said right at the start, actually I'm lucky enough to lead a very large team, and they do all the hard work and I get to drink wine and eat tapas. So I feel reasonably guilty about that. So actually when I came over here, they're all still at work. So the symptoms vary hugely in severity, and through my clinic, my research clinic, I think I do. Yes, I do. I have a couple of different kids, just to give you an idea about who comes to my clinic. Let's look at the kids on the left. Severely intellectually disabled, may never learn to talk, almost certainly will never learn to talk, will maybe not ever learn to toilet themselves, will most certainly injure themselves out of frustration, will require homeschooling for the rest of their life, will never complete education, never get a job, and remain profoundly disabled for the rest of their life. Before I move on to the second child, that's not good enough, and we know that's not good enough. The second child is completely and utterly different. Will walk into the clinic room, crack a joke, tell me I've got a very small ears for my face, or some other quirky thing. I assume he's lying. He will be absolutely able to participate in normal schooling, will complete school, will have normal IQ if not high IQ, get employment, get gainful employment, may even get married. Hugely important. Actually, just a small digression. One of the really formative moments in my life was just a young man who, when I was a clinician, now I'm a researcher, who his absolute desperate desire was to get a girlfriend, and he was like the child on the right, and he came to see me and said, how do I get a girlfriend? And of course, how the hell do I know how do you get a girl? I mean, I was about 21 at the time, and I was thinking, God, can you tell me? But anyway, we did, and he went through, his education was just fantastic. He went through school, he completed school, we got him into university, and when I was off overseas for some of my postdoc training, he kept in touch, and I still mentor a lot of the kids, and he emailed me, saying, Andrew, I really need to talk to you. I'm like, oh, okay. And after he got this girlfriend, he got on the phone to me and said, Andrew, I really need to break up with her. And I thought, oh my God, after 5 years of trying... Anyway, the point here is that the children vary absolutely from one extreme to the other, and you'll never ever see two children the same. And I say children because I work with children, but of course children with autism grow up to be adults with autism, and that's a very important point. Okay, the other thing people know about autism is that the proportion of kids in the population is increased out of sight 25-fold in the last 50 years. Just rack your brains with that. 25-fold in the last 50 years. Incredible statistics. Imagine if cancer had gone up that much. Do you think about the panic that would invoke in society? It's more than the combined number of children with CP, diabetes, deafness, blindness, leukemia, and that's not to downplay them, it's just to show you that's the number of them combined. It just shows you the scale of the issue that we're dealing with. Most classes in school now will have one, if not two kids with autism. We diagnose autism based on behaviour, and that's social difficulties, communication impairment, or repetitive behaviours. And again, that can differ on a hugely large scale. Okay, so my lab is based around answering what I think are the two causes, and of course what I think is heavily informed by the experts, the parents and the people with autism themselves. First is, what causes autism? We know it's an hereditary condition. You may or may not know that in the 60s and 70s, people thought that autism was caused by this horrible term, the refrigerator mother. The fact that women, when they were mothering, were so cold that they were turning these children to have intellectual disability. In fact, the famous quote is that the parents only defrosted enough to copulate, and then they fridged up again. It was just this most horrible, horrible thing, and you can absolutely imagine the heartache that caused. We now know it's an absolutely hereditary condition. Twin studies have shown that without a doubt. The genes funnel down into a neurobiological abnormality, which funnels down into how people think, and of course that manifests as behaviour. Basically, the lab that I'm lucky enough to lead, we do research in all sorts of this area. So certainly identifying genes. Identifying genes is a very sexy thing in science. Actually, it's really boring. It's really fantastic computer science talks, but sit behind a computer is not for me, and so it is a great intellectual exercise, but it can be boring after a while for me. For the brain's far more interesting for me, and certainly some of the stuff that we've started to find is that in 90% of people, the most important areas of the brain for language are on the left side of the brain, 100% fine. Now, we've adapted this funky technique where you use little ultrasound probes to measure the speed of blood through the middle cerebral arteries. We've each got a middle cerebral artery on each side of our head, and it irrigates the best part of the brain on each side. What we've tended to find is that people with autism are more likely to have the language centres on their right side of their brain, which is a very interesting thing when you think about the language disabilities we see in this population. That's just one aspect. The thinking aspects that we've been looking at is the idea of inner speech. Now, this was actually my PhD work, which probably like the sibling I should have left behind long ago, I keep in our lab somehow. Poor my brother and sister. I'm glad they're not here. But the issue is when we think as kids and adults and we're growing up, we use words, we use verbal language within our head to plan. That starts out as overt speech. Okay, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to go there. And watching kids do it, it's fascinating watching kids do it. We gradually start to internalise that. What we find with people with autism, and we've found this with various experimental techniques, is that they're far more likely to use visual images to plan their days rather than verbal language. And it's a fascinating thing. So we've developed the hypothesis, and it's now taken off. It's called the thinking in pictures hypothesis, and it's very much out there now. And of course, because we know so little about the genes, the brain and cognition, we diagnose based upon behaviour. But just because we currently don't know the dozens upon dozens, all of the causes of autism, doesn't mean that we can't actually do something to help these people in their lives, okay? And that's the second aim of our lab. What can we do to help people with autism live the most fulfilling life possible? How do we help them reach their absolutely fullest potential? And that's the second aspect of our lab. Now, a lot of my intervention work, the therapy work, is built around this academic pomposity, ease, interactive specialisation framework, which essentially means interacting with your child, basically. Yes, there it is. There you go. That's me. I forgot who brought out the thing before, but that was it. Infants are absolutely fascinating to watch, and people say that, first 6 months, little infants are blobs. Absolutely not so. Kids are born with an innate ability to attend, engage, to orient to the social environment out in our environment. It's absolutely fascinating to watch. Now, there you go. You see this behaviour. That's an absolutely innate ability. What that does is once you orient and engage with the social environment, it actually helps you develop language. Okay, you absolutely look at your family, you look at your friends, and you understand what the social information is. And then this gets in the cycle, which feeds into your brain. Your brain develops the social areas of your brain. You go back to orienting, go back to language, and you go round and round and round. Now, this framework that we've developed is essentially saying that people with autism or infants that go on to develop autism, we tend to diagnose autism about 3 to 4 years of age, they have a bit of a breakdown there. They don't have that innate ability to engage, orient, and attend to the social environment. Okay, now that's a massive thing. Now I'll show you why we know this. What we do is we do longitudinal studies. We look at a whole group of infants, and then some of them go on to develop autism just by chance. Okay. Now we know that infants who go on to get a diagnosis of autism later, they attend far less to faces and eyes than kids who don't go on to develop autism. As I said, there's a very innate ability for kids to actually say that is where the centre of the social information is. Infants who go on to develop autism don't have that innate ability. And the other one is this. Now that looks really cute, doesn't it? It's absolute hell to do. And that's the only photo you could ever get of an infant smiling while they do it. Usually they're bawling. When we're born, we have an absolute, our brain has, again, an innate ability to attend to speech and prioritise speech over background noise. And you can see that through all sorts of things. This is just EEG. This is measuring the electrical content of the brain or the messaging in the brain. What we find with infants who go on to develop autism is that their brains don't have that classic neural signature when speech is played. In fact, the neural response actually looks exactly like if background noise was played. Okay, so what we're seeing is the infants who go on to develop autism in their brains, they're not prioritising speech as the most important information. Okay, it's fascinating stuff. Now, that's the thing where we think it's broken down. Now, what our whole job is to do in the therapy space is I think will it go again? No, it won't. Let's get that. There we go. That thing. That's what we have to think. We have to say, okay, infants who go on to develop autism aren't prioritising the social information. We have to make them prioritise the social information. It's not going to cure autism, and I need to say this out loud. I don't want to cure autism. People with autism have so many different strengths and wonders that they can bring to this world. What we want to do is reduce the disability associated with autism. We want to make a child who may never go on to talk. We want to help them talk. We want to get them into employment. We want to get them into social relationships and then eventually break up and then maybe get back together. Just like normal relationships. So that's what we want to do. We want to reduce the disability. And what I call it is opening the social pores. Okay, we want to open the social pores of these infants to actually take in all of that social information, force them to take in that social information with all of their strength. And it takes them a lot of strength, I can tell you. So we're doing a number of trials. Oxytocin's one of the sexier ones we've got going. Oxytocin's a hormone peptide called all sorts of things, moral molecule, love molecule of every sort of thing under the sun. Essentially what we do know is it acts on the social areas of the brain. And what we're doing is we put it into a nasal spray, would you believe, and we're using it with toddlers. And you can imagine trying to get that nasal spray up the toddler, just running around trying to get it up their nostrils. So that's not a lot of fun. But the idea is that this will open their social pores to help them to attend and engage with the social environment. Again, we're not quite trying to cure autism, we're trying to reduce the long-term disability. Okay, fish oil. Where the fish oil has a number of properties. It sort of sits in this hybrid between alternative medicine and mainstream medicine, and it is mainstream medicine in a number of conditions now. I think there are some good data to show that there is some concentration and attention benefits from fish oil, but I think with autism we're using it far too old. We need to go back to infants to see how that may actually open these social pores. Then I think also behavioural and iPad apps hold a huge amount of potential. So I'll knock it off there, I think. I will. But only just to finish, to say, and I was thinking just during the last talk, how can I wrap this up? But I think only to say that the takeaway point is that, I mean, look, we're all fighting a battle that nobody else will ever really understand. This is a battle that has many ups and downs for many families, and I'm absolutely conscious that there will be people with autism, people who have a child with autism in this audience, and if we can all be a little bit more cognizant of the battle that they're fighting, the wonders and joys and the challenges that goes along with it, I think that's a decent thing. So I'll end there. Thank you.